Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited for our guest today. Vaness Henry is a shamanic practitioner and author. She explores evolved body care by identifying afflictions in the body's energy field that may lead to illness or disease. Using the human design body graph to view the colors and tones in a person's inner and outer worlds, Vanessa works with others to explore self healing. As a childhood cancer survivor with a history in educational and motivational speaking, Vanessa is known for heartfelt, impactful insights in the fields of human design, feng shui, and the shamanic arts. She is a community appointed human design variable resource. And welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, fun. How are you?
I'm so good. Like I was telling you before, I have wanted to pick your brain for quite some time. So I'm really excited to have you here and dive into all things self-healing because we're aligned in that.
In that realm?
Yes.
What on earth could you want to be picking my brain about, little markets person? What could that possibly be?
Well, you have a lot of value in my mind.
Thank you. Open heart, too. I'm looking at. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, but so it's funny because in my journey, I feel like I found human design after the fact, if that makes sense. And I was able to look back using that resource and make sense of a lot of things that I went
Mm.
through. And now I'm able to use that to talk like real time with my clients. And when I came across your work on the variables, I was like, need more, need more.
Love that. Um, so when you're working with people, do you go into variables with them?
I'm starting to, yeah.
Love,
I'm
love.
I'm
Mhm.
taking your Art of Healing course and digesting things and using that now because of course, like I think you can relate, but when I started learning, I would just like ask all my friends and family and look at theirs, and I was finding so much, like my partner, for example, always gets headaches and he's outer vision and his first in the digestion variable, and like I just put all these pieces together and I'm like, okay, there's something
You're
to
seeing
this
it.
all.
Mhm.
I can see it
Yeah.
all. It makes sense. I want to go deeper with her.
So, what are some of the things, like in your own experiment? What are some of the things that you've been experimenting with in your variables when you're playing with your diet, when you're playing with your environment, and you're trying to get more in touch with yourself rather than, let's say, the governing bodies that have homogenized you before? Where has where have you been having the most results or the most change or the most impact, I guess?
The digestion one was a big thing for me, and I have gone on rants on some of my podcasts because I feel like the whole like eating together as a family is this big like whole 1950s movie thing, and like you aren't a good family if you don't all sit down together. But I'm just like watching my partner and his kids, and I like know I'm like, she's calm touch, like and I'm
Mm,
like, oh my god, we can't all, my high sound and her calm touch like don't jive all the time. And I see her picking at her food and I'm like, I want to crank the music up, or the kids start fighting and I'm like, oh, can't eat, I'm done, we gotta go.
totally.
And so I think it's just such, like you said, you have to play with it and be willing to not be in this black and white
Totally.
HD world. But it's just given me such permission to ask myself, like, what am I doing here? What am I doing there? And how can I just start over and do what feels right for me? And I think the way you talk about the variables, like, right, high sound, for example, and most people are like, oh, play with music, turn up the volume or turn down the volume. And it's
It's too
okay, maybe
superficial.
that's a small piece, but it's not really that. And the first thing that really got me is the way you talk about ingredients, because I'm like, nope, I need to add feta and this and that. And like, it's just like when I make my meals, it's this like recipe, like craziness, and just giving myself permission to that, and then combined with outer vision, so of course it has to look pretty.
It's gonna be
And
beautiful. Yeah.
it's
Well,
just,
it's got to look appetizing to you, right? Yeah.
yeah.
You bring up some really, really good points. I think when we're looking at the determination variable in human design, it's very attractive and elusive because we're essentially talking about diet. And, people like you and I who kind of came of age in like the 90s, there was some sort of toxic narratives floating through the ether that we were ingesting. And as fellow sound people, we were actually ingesting that in a greater way than some other people were. For example, sitting around the table and dining as a family is actually so amazing for some people. In fact, for some people, that is exactly what they need. And it's an ideal environment for digestion and ingest, like taking everything in, because there are stages in nourishment, right? Some of us are more sensitive when we're consuming it and ingesting it and taking it in. And some of us are more sensitive when we're digesting it. And that's where some of our symptoms kind of come up. And the issue is when we force everybody to be the same and all eat around the table because it happens to be good for, let's say, dad or something. And then we force ourselves to eat that way. Some of us are losing rather than explore. We all eat differently and we are all sensitive to different things. And eating is such a personal thing because it's our nourishment. It's what we need to feed ourselves, sustain ourselves, and go on and be as healthy as we can be. And as soon as we start to discover, oh, my way isn't the best way for my child, well, I want my child to be healthy, but we haven't always had the awareness shift of just because it's good for me doesn't mean it's good for everybody else. And I know as a parent, this child is a part of me. So there's this narcissistic component where you're like, what do you mean you don't like the color red like I do? It's like, oh, and of course they're their own person. There's just that moment of, needing to self-evaluate that what I like and want and need is not necessarily what my child or partner or anybody else wants. And because eating is so personal, I have found it can be very challenging to work with people in this area specifically because of the community and family perception of mealtime. And when we look at determination and we're looking at that top left variable, that arrow that flanks the head, we can have one of 6 colors there. We can be somebody who's an appetite eater, a taste eater, a thirst eater, a touch eater, a sound eater, or a light eater. And depending on how you're colored in this area, you are going to be fed by different things. You're going to consume and digest life and your experiences differently. And when you start to realize people eat different ways, you can really see it on them. And you can actually notice how different they are. And when I started to work with people specifically in this area, when we focused on food, you're not ready to experiment. And interestingly, when you go more metaphorical and philosophical, and this is kind of where the shamanic side comes out, and you present diet and nutrition and nourishment in a way that recognizes how evolved someone is, I think it's very affirming. Mm-hmm. And it also, let's just look at you and I as sound color people, both high sound people. What does it mean to be someone who feeds through sound? Well, sure, you could try and put music on and control the acoustic environment when you're eating and let me know how that goes, but you're not going to really notice a big change in how nourished you feel because your mind is like, that sounds like bullshit. You know what I mean? So when you make it more about sound color, people are sensitive to volume, not so much loudness, but amounts. How much before I'm full? What is my limit here? You start to explore themes of overeating and undereating. There could be weight fluctuations in these people. And sometimes when the sound person has had those fluctuations, they go, oh, and they're like, oh, there's been phases in my life where, that has maybe happened. You're starting to make them look at not just eating food, but perhaps the music they eat, the content they consume, the people they hang out with. And you start to realize eating happens in this really multidimensional way. And how can we explore and understand that part of our evolved nature and de-emphasize what we actually put in our mouth? Because I have found what we put in our mouth is almost like the last step of experimentation there. It just starts to happen naturally. You simply start to feed yourself in a way that feels good and natural for you. And you're not forcing your body to do that. It simply does it on its own. And I think the way there, the gate there, is looking at the more metaphorical side of your consumption. And a great, great, great place to start looking is consuming content, because we're part cyborg now and we need our tech. And let's say you're scrolling a social media as a sound person. Well, when have I reached my limit? When have I had too much? When do I feel fried? If you are able to start to attune your awareness to that, the next time you sit down to eat, you also might notice, I'm full. Why am I still eating? So building the awareness of that sense of fullness as a sound person is really where the experimenting is. I've been going on for a while here, but when you look at all these colors in the determination variable, and you see we're sensitive to different things, experimenting starts to become really fun, but it can be intimidating when you make it about food.
Yeah. Well, I think too, food is, it's so conditioned in us, right? Because especially when we're young, we don't have control. We eat what our parents ate, especially like
Absolutely.
culture has a big influence, like where you grew up, like, and so it's out of your hands for the first at least, I don't know, 10 years of your life. And so it is, I think there's so much more power in looking at it the way you're saying, because it gives us the power, the control back. And I
Well,
think,
you want them to experiment with the material. And the fact of the matter is, when you do some of these classic translations that are very, monotone, eat with music on, that because that's how you're superficially understanding the information. You're not actually engaging with the material in a high quality, meaningful way. So to me, as the person who's trying to connect with the person on the other side, I need to make an adjustment, because ultimately I want to connect with that person to leave them with something so that they have received some type of teaching. You want to verify learning. And in my experience of just kind of going back and forth with people, we really did need to make it about the formless part of the experience to even get them thinking about the physical one, which, that's not how I would think we would be. I think we would be very like food, and then we get more, but yeah, in my experience, it hasn't worked. So I just kind of go with what works when I'm working with people. And a lot of my work does evolve around working with people who are unwell. Because I was a cancer survivor, I talk about that a lot. And so I attract a lot of people who are experiencing a variety of illnesses, but specifically cancer. And when I have started working with cancer patients and really reevaluating their nourishment and their environment specifically, because they're usually going through some type of treatment. And so you would really want to set up the body to get the most out of that experience. You'd want to be nourishing at such a high quality way. When we do this experimentation here in this way, that explores, like, especially in a sick person, because there's this aspect of like holistic care. What has been going on in your life that led us here? And doctors are not going to do that with you. They're going to focus on your symptoms and your treatment. But we do need to have, at least for me, when I was sick, there was this sort of reevaluation of life, because you're scared. And what do I need to know about this reality? Because clearly I'm missing something. And I think when we have that experience, we're open to new information. And in my experience, when I work with people who have types of cancer, other types of illnesses, they've reached that point. They are open. They want to look at this place. And when we experiment here, we have dramatic results with their treatment going down. In other words, they don't need as much medicines because their body is responding more quickly. And in some cases, treatment stops because it's not needed. That's pretty profound information to me. And once that has started happening repeatedly, I started to be a little bit louder about my work in this area, because as somebody who is a cancer survivor, the experience is so terrifying, and you really do question and reevaluate things. And going through treatment is so hard on the body. And you are left with such long-term symptoms that affect your life. If there's anything out there that could make that experience less toxic and traumatic, I would want to declare it and shout about it. You know what I mean? And I think anyone who's kind of had those experiences would feel a similar way if they were called.
yeah, absolutely. I think my boyfriend was reading a book and he said a quote to me, and I like will never forget this. Like, most people want many things, a sick person only wants one. And I think it's
Oof.
such like,
That hits me right in the,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
I about 5 years ago I went through a time where I woke up and over the course of a week my entire body was covered in psoriasis, and
Ooh.
it came out of left field, out of nowhere. And that kind of is one of the things that started my entire thing. I got
Okay.
into Louise Hay first and did
I
did
know
work
we've bonded
there.
over that. Hey, we
Yeah.
liked that. Yeah.
hmm Um, but yeah, so I think what you said, like people are, when you get to that stage where you're scared for your life, you're like willing to go there and look at everything. And I wish that people were willing to do that sooner. But I think you're right. Like if you see these trends, if you're seeing this, like inform us, shout from the rooftops.
Yeah.
Like,
I would love to just translate psoriasis from Louise Hay, just because I pulled it up. Fear of being hurt, deadening the senses of the self, refusing to accept responsibility for our own feelings. Where was the psoriasis on the body? Everywhere?
everywhere.
Was there any localized on the face?
There was like up here and
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Yeah, literally, it was like all covering my entire body.
I would love to. So that's scary. Like,
Mm,
that's, you have an incredible example of like your body shouting at you to get attention. Something's going on with me and I'm having this reaction. Part of my symptoms when I was sick were these rashes on my body. And so I do know the feeling of like, like, I think for me, the fear was, I don't know what's going on inside. And also, how could I have a tumor inside me that I can't see? How did something grow inside me that I can't see? And when the body is behaving in a way that we don't really understand, I know for me, it felt like a disconnect, like a lack of trust with my body. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. I
mhm.
want to get into talking about signs and symptoms because that's where my work gets a little bit more shamanic and it starts to deviate from classic human design. And when we look at the tonal level in the body graph, we have gates, lines, and then we have color, tone, and then base, right at the deepest level of our design. And at the tonal level, this is very, very deep. And depending on what tones we have in our body and the internal and external variables, so your cognition and your external sense and your environment, whatever you're calibrated with here, it's as if your body has these predetermined signs and symptoms. And it's going to express in a way through those symptoms to get your attention. For example, you're a markets person with a sense of smell in your environment. Is that correct?
hmm
So we know you have really strong instincts in an aligned marketplace, but we also know there's going to be times where you're like, I don't like this, I don't know why. This is a splenic tone. And as you're going and navigating reality, your body is going to give you these signals. Yes, no, and you may not always know. And it's up to you to just trust those kind of alerts in your body because that's how you navigate. Now, let's say you had something going on in your lifestyle where you really weren't listening to that. You really weren't honoring that. You were, let's say, the family wanted you to do something. We made these plans, so I'm just going to go, or whatever the case may be. And you do that enough times, you're not honoring what those signals are for you. And the reason your body is giving you those signals is because it's saying this space is not safe for me. This
hmm
is an unsafe space for me. And you happen to be somebody who has a very, very sensitive environment and you need things very fresh in order to stay healthy. So you're very sensitive to when things fall stale. And if you are living in a lifestyle where you're not honoring that, you may simply just start to develop smell symptoms. You may have chronic issues with your tonsils or adenoids, or just simply like a runny nose that will never go away. You're always stuffed up. Anything kind of in that nose, mouth, throat area can be an indicator of a lifestyle ailment. But because you're also outer vision cognition, this is kind of like the super sense of your body. It's not one that just flares up as you're navigating. An outer vision person has a very powerful mind. The way we're not even looking at your personality variable. So I should say you have a powerful brain, actually. And you're able to break things down in a way to understand them and process them. And so there is an aspect of, even though you're a sound eater, things do need to kind of be assembled and broken down or put together in certain ways for you to even be open to consuming it. That is training, courses, education. They need to be assembled a certain way before you can digest it and consume it. But if you start to have a lack of nourishment in your life, and you're not getting the nutrients that you need, whether it's through studies or food or relationships or your job or whatever, you may start to exhibit outer vision symptoms, which is going to be anything going on in the mask. So this could be as extreme as periods of psychosis, because there is a lot of mental activity needed here, but it could be extreme acne, or it could be cystic acne that flares up. Or it could be issues with the eyes, especially, or dry eyes, itchy eyes, watery eyes, anything kind of going on there. So when you would see that you have that predisposition, and you'd see that you're an outer vision person, a little asterisk, I should say, you do need a very specific birth time, because we're very deep in the chart here. So if you are born a minute later, sometimes your tones can change. So if you're looking this deep in the design, you do want to do some experimentation around your birth time. But if you're an aware person and you are looking at your body's signs and symptoms, and you start to notice you're having outer vision symptoms, you get to now remedy and experiment with your color, which for you is sound. So the recipe is, if I have a symptom in my tone, I heal and remedy it with color experimentation. So as a sound person, if you're getting these symptoms in your mask or your eyes or your outer vision, where you're wanting to experiment is, I'm eating or doing something too much or not enough. The limits are out of whack for me. Does that resonate with you at any point in your life that you'd be able to share with us?
It does, and I just had a realization that the
Fun.
psoriasis started on my face first.
Fascinating. Okay, can we
So,
hear about what was going on at that time or what you were feeling?
well, I got divorced, got a new job, and moved to Ireland.
Oh, and let's not forget though too, like deep hurt came up and like a deadening of the senses.
Yeah.
So that language, deadening of the sense, or whatever that was that we had said, whoa, your senses are here to help you live, survive, navigate. Your outer vision is deeply connected to your gut authority, your sacral authority. And if you're not well fed there, you're not in touch with your authority. You're not in touch with your gut feelings. You're not listening to your body. And so if we're not listening to our body, my theories are that's when we can develop really intense illnesses. So sorry for interrupting and jumping in there. What was going on with you at that time?
So it's funny, like I'm putting pieces together now, even though like I've looked at all of this before. Yeah, like I wanted to always move to Ireland, and the opportunity came up, and while I also know I was meant to move here, at the time I took a job that was not right for me, and I had
Okay.
moved over here um in a
You're
corporate
on the
job.
roof though. Like,
Yeah.
so,
I
okay. So you do need to have that leaving aspect.
I think I thought, okay, I'm doing it for a couple of years just to get there and it'll be okay. And it wasn't okay. Like something in me knew. I actually remembered a conversation because it was someone I used to work with that got me this opportunity. And I remember sitting in my car in Chicago on the phone with him saying, like, trying to decide if I was going to take the job to move to Ireland. And I was like, maybe I should just do coaching like on here and not take the job. And he was like, what the hell? And so I ended up moving and like things have fallen into place over here. So it was all meant
You
to
did what
be.
you
But
wanted anyway. Yeah. How fun.
yeah, but I mean, it was my body saying no for me. It's funny. I've always connected it, I think, a bit to the sacral because I was so people pleasing. I have to do this. I have to be in a corporate job. I have to have a good um, salary, whatever, all the things, right? And I got over here. I was unhappy. I was lonely. I had no friends. I was not, yeah, I was not doing well in my environment in life. And I think that's when my body started to talk to me.
Um, I think because diet is such an attractive subject, because we're diet obsessed, I think that's why people tend to look there first. But if you look at, even any work of any kind of psychologist or therapist right now, there's a big narrative around like, you can't heal your wounds if you're in the same environment where those wounds happened, you know? And from the human design perspective, you're not able to nourish yourself before your environment is set up, before you are in the environment that facilitates proper nourishment. The body is literally not open to eating. It's not open to taking anything in. And for a markets person like yourself, really what you're most sensitive to is the trade you're doing, is the art form. Oh, a sacred sound coming out. Fun. It's not so much sensitivity on the wider place, although it is, and that matters, of course. You do want to be in a walkable area. Markets people, they need to have that walkability so they can go out and regulate or do their errands or, their little things that they do. But what's more important is what they're kind of pouring their energy into, what their trade is, how they're exchanging with people. So it sounds like, as a 6-line profile, when you have your Saturn return and enter your 30s, there is this detachment that happens in our life. And we go on the roof where we are kind of evaluating what happened to us and looking back at our experience. It was like, that wasn't okay. That shouldn't have happened. And we kind of enter this detached processing. And for many of us, we change our environment because there's traumas in our origin site. And it's not any ill will for those origin sites per se, but just the healing journey. You need distance from yourself and that relationship or that home or that job to really see what happened there and what happened to you. And what you're doing is setting your body up to finally experience healing or to get out of that harmful environment so you can finally ingest and experience nourishment. So if you have symptoms and you want to be healing or you want to self-inquire around those symptoms, the very first place you're going to start is environment. Environment is the very first place you experiment with when you're on any kind of healing journey. And so much of my work in the world emphasizes environment. I do a lot about set up your home as the first place that you experiment. Let's use these feng shui principles for a markets person or a caves person or a mountains person or whatever. And I like that because people can really immediately feel the change in their body. If you rearrange your bedroom, the way you go in and use that bedroom space is different. You are a changed person. You might be laying on the different side of the bed. You might be pointing a different direction. You might have to reach a different way to turn your lamp on. You are different. And so you will be a different person when you're existing in that space. So if you're ever really wanting to make a change because you're not feeling good with your health, resetting your home arrangement is a really good place to start that actually has results and is very easy and practical. And for a markets person, one of their most regulating practices could be those seasonal switching up the rooms or bringing out the summer clothes or winter clothes or just making those trades or exchanges. So do you do anything like this in your life?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the things you recognize that you do as a markets person?
I definitely do seasonal refreshes, and it's like I just know, like you said, when something goes stale, I'm like, oh, I don't like that artwork
Blah.
anymore. I need to switch it. I need to, I have this stack of books behind me on my desk. Like sometimes I just switch the books that are there. And
okay, well, let's pause for a second. Let's just pause for one moment there then. You innately know that about yourself. Let's imagine you as a small child in your room, and now that bedspread's blech. It's like, ugh. And mom and dad are like, that's your fucking bedspread. Deal with it. And it's like, but it's not good for me. And they're like, it's a blanket. Get over it. I don't want to spend more money on it. This is the exact places where there's a lack of awareness, where we are inadvertently hurting our kids and we don't know. Yes, we bought it. Yes, it cost money. Yes, that's all extremely valid. And we do want to see, now that I'm a parent, I'm like, oh, I get it, Especially for me, if you make dinner and the kid's like, I don't like it. It's like, oh, I spent the energy making this and the money's on this. But do I really want to train my child and condition my child to go against his natural intelligence? Do I want to train him that it's more important to make me and others happy by being polite and eating that rather than listening to your body's natural intelligence? I don't want to do that, actually. So do I really care that he doesn't want to eat his potatoes? No, fine. Here, have a cucumber cut up. Oh, I love cucumbers. Great. Eat that. But we don't like to, again, eating is so personal. Eating is so personal. And human design as a system was originally translated for kids, to raise kids in a more aware space. And when Ra Uru started introducing this material, it was not being digested. And the entire focus of his human designed craft became about deconditioning adults so they could raise children. And so we're among a generation of like the deconditioners. And I do think we are going to get to a place of collective awareness, just like we have with tools like astrology or anything like that, where there is a general understanding that we're manifestors and generators and projectors, and we have these different ways of making decisions. Once we get to that place and we're aware parents, and let's say we're having children, we don't need to teach them that they're a generator. They will inherently be born with sacral authority or emotional, and they will be operating correctly. And our only job is to recognize that brilliance separate from ourselves and not put what works for us onto them, but recognize, oh, I have a caves baby. Oh my gosh, I have a feeling cognition kid. My child is empathic and highly sensitive. What do I need to know about the parent when he's what do I need to know as the parent, when I'm, let's say, setting him up in a school environment? How can I inform his teachers about this so he has the space set up for him? And then we're raising children who are more in touch with their inner authority and are listening to their bodies. And that becomes their normal. That becomes just what they're doing. And I think ultimately that's where human design is going. But what is needed at this time is the parents' capacity to build our recognition that if my Market's child is sick of their blanket, it's actually toxic for me to have it on them. That doesn't fully make sense to me, but I'm going to honor it. And I'm just going to switch out their blanket this season. My other kid doesn't give a shit about that, but my children are different, because we say that too. Yeah. You do the same thing for the kids. And then you see the kids are so different, and you look at them energetically and you're like, actually, this is not supportive of that one child,
Yeah.
So I do think ultimately it's a study that's for kids, and we're in the generation right now that's kind of healing the inner child, if that makes sense. I don't know if you relate to that in that way, but I know you said there were stepchildren around and that you're watching them kind of ingest differently. You're in a challenging position, if you're the step parent, you like, how do you handle that? How do you handle eating altogether?
Well, they're all teenagers, so they're not all there all the time anyways.
Which is kind of amazing. Like, go eat how you want. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I try to just influence because my boyfriend is still of the eat your thing, we made it. And so I try to gently interject when I can influence the situation at all. But I just notice it.
We all go through that. We're on our own trip when we do that.
Yeah.
We're I made it. I paid for it. I'm the parent. Listen to me. It's that I'm the authority of you. Yeah. That's what we're doing. And we're doing that because our parents did it to us. So we just think that's what we're supposed to do. But if you really look at it and you really assess it, like, do I really want to be telling my children not to listen to their body? As soon as you position it that way, the parent's like, oh, well, of course I don't. But like, I still made the meal. Yeah. And there is an inner war. There is a wrestle.
Yeah. I try to just introduce about he's open taste, and like we were on holidays over over the new year at the beginning of the year, and
that's
like
really sensitive.
One evening where he put the randomest things, and I was like, that's open taste. And like, so I try to just share that
to him.
Yeah. So he notices, oh, I felt really good after that, so it starts to click kind of without, because there's no point in shoving it in anyone's face if they're not ready. They won't digest it.
Great point, Vicki. In the 2010s, when I first started kind of talking about this online, at that time, collectively, like we hadn't gone through COVID, a lot of the feedback, first of all, a lot of the people attracted and experimenting were women, not exclusively, but a lot of them were. And a lot of the feedback at that time I heard, because we're sensitive to feedback as sound people, was that their partner was like, this is stupid. What are you doing? You're ridiculous. They didn't have the support there. And most people have undefined hearts. And so they're deflated and discouraged. And a lot of what I would kind of reflect back then is like, we don't have to try and put this on our partners. How is that any different than us putting these things on our kids? And we get caught in our trip there. We're like, well, you got to be better. And as fellow six lines, we sometimes want to perfect our partner, you know? If you just a couple little tweaks, you just,
Never. I don't
and
know what you're talking about.
what? Yeah, I know. My partner is a six line too, and he does it to me. So that's why I'm like, here we are doing this to each other. But what really works there in my experience is just to keep the focus on you and your experiment, because it is a really isolating, at times alienating thing to radically do you and listen to your body, because we have been groomed, bred, and raised in a time where you shouldn't listen to your body. You should listen to the governing bodies. So it is kind of a foreign radical act to reallocate power back at the seat of your soul. And when you do that and you make it just about you, you do start to become healthier. You do start to lose relationships that have been in your life for a long time, because you start to wake up and realize, ooh, the role I'm playing in this dynamic and relationship is not healthy. And we either need to change the dynamic here, or there's no longer going to be a dynamic. And that happens a lot in the human design experiment, as you realize you've been putting up with shit that you shouldn't, or you've been mistreating people in a way that you shouldn't be. And when you kind of go through that and make these changes, you do start to become healthier, and people do see it on you and they can just feel it. And when you keep it about you and your experiment and your health, and people do start to notice, then they come to you with curiosity and they want it for themselves as well. But, as a manifester, if anyone comes to me and is like, you got to do this, man, I'm like, no, I don't. No, thank you. So I don't want to ever approach someone that way, because I know it wouldn't really be the way to connect with me. So selfishly, when you keep it about you and your experiment, it has a wider impact on your partner, your family, your entire network and circle. And in my experience, the partners then come. They do. And now I've been doing this for a decade, and all the husbands are in it, and they're all like, it's so funny to see how far it's come, and the children that have grown, raised with parents who are actively kind of looking at this. Yeah, it's very inspiring to me.
Yeah, I love this so much. I can hear your gate 46 and all of that talk about embodiment.
Yeah, what do you hear when you're hearing that? Because we sometimes sound like robots, and we're like, oh, gate 22 and the 2145. And we're rattling off all these numbers. And in my experience, people tend to know things about the gates and hear things about the gates that they've studied, or they have it in themselves, or they have it in an important person. What do you hear, sound person, when you are hearing that 46?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually with one of my friends. We're studying the gene keys
Love.
right now, and it's my SQ. So it is all about embodiment, and I think that it's funny what I hear or what I think of when I think of that gate is it's been my clash with my fully open ego, like trying to
Ooh,
prove myself versus just embodying what I do, what I've learned, what I know, and letting people, like you said, see that and be like, oh, I want to work with her. Like
right.
I want what she's having.
The 46 is my conscious sun, and so prominent in my design. And one weird way I really notice this show up is like the love of life.
Mm.
And there's, I really don't want to be dismissive or disrespectful with what I'm about to say. So I'm asking for a little bit of grace. But I have a very hard time computing, understanding, relating to people who want to end their life when they are in such a place of desperation and unhappiness and sickness that it's easier to leave. I had this moment in the hospital when I found out I had cancer, and you find out you have this terminal illness. And then I was kind of left alone in the hospital room because I had to live there for the summer. And it was the first moment where I was alone. And I did not know I was an ego manifester at the time. I was only 16. It was about 5 years later that I would even hear of human design. And there was this moment of like, again, strong will to live as the ego manifester, where I was like, I will not die from this. Like, foot in the ground, I will not. the will to live and fight was so strong and innate in me. And I was in an environment, because I was a teenager, I was treated on children's ward. So I was surrounded by sick and dying children. And the way, I have chills just remembering it, the way this created a rage in me. And as these kids started dying, I would just fester in that room with rage. And, it made me fight. It made me have this will to live. And I think because so young, I was confronted with death and illness, and it was so scary to me, that there is such a strong will to live and be healthy and happy and love and adore the body, that it is hard for me to connect and relate with somebody who is in the place of no will to live. Because it's like, my God, how did we get here? What do you need? How can I be there for you? Because this is an incredible gift to be alive. And if you're set up in a situation where you have lost that, we have failed you. And what's needed now to bring you back to us? I think that's one of the most devastating things. And also, I have a family who is very, because we've had so much death around us in our life. My mom is very like, when I'm old at the end and I don't know anything, I want to be able to end it. I've researched this company made that I can, end my life when I need to. And I think that should be my choice. And, this isn't necessarily my viewpoint, but it's coming from my mother, who has spent a life taking care of sick people. And to her, it would be so burdening for her to be sick and have someone else care for her, because she spent her whole life doing that heaven forbid someone should have to take care of her, that she just wants to end it before anybody can do that, And it's like, Mom, it's not a burden to take care of you. It's an honor and a privilege, actually. And she just doesn't see it that way, because she's caring for her mom and it is feeling hard. And so she has a lot to teach me there, I suppose. But for me, the 46 is this absolute love of life and the body and aliveness and a celebration of that aliveness. So it's not obviously when somebody has lost that, there's something, they're very ill and they need something and support. And I think it's probably one of the most devastating things to witness is that,
Yeah.
And I've seen kids dying of illnesses, but it's when the want to leave, is really heartbreaking for me. So that's how I feel that. That's why I feel that specific gate. If we could even isolate somebody's experience through one specific gate,
Yeah. So you talked about environment being the first go-to, right? When someone's experiencing illness, having issues. Can you talk a little bit about the 6 environments, and
absolutely,
just real quick, like what someone could start to look at if that's where they're beginning?
So if this area of study is attracting you, yes, one of the best places to sink your teeth in and get experimenting is with the environment variable. When you're looking at the arrows that flank the head, these are the 4 variables. The variables on the red side are the body's side, and the lower left variable is your environment. And we can have one of 6 colors there. We can be a caves person, we can be a markets person like you, we can be a kitchens person, a mountains person, valleys person, or a shores person like me. And each of these environments will resonate to different things. And some of the most simple things, I'm going to say one kind of simple thing for each environment, because if you are experimenting, this would be something to just start with. If you're a caves person, one of the most important things for you is to have a sense of safety and feel held by your environment. So if you're ever in risky or dangerous places, or people don't have your back, or there's shit going on behind your back, it's very detrimental to you. You really do need to have safe relationships, a safe home, a safe neighborhood, a safe career. And safe is subjective. It's what that means to you. It's not universal. Once we evolve, when we're first born, we're in the womb, we're in the cave, and there's one exit, that's the cave. Once we evolve from the cave, we move into the market. So you leave the cave and suddenly there's this field outside. And depending on the season, there's different things growing. So the markets person is somebody who's very, very sensitive to the seasons in life. And they want to develop a cadence in their life where they're living season to season. So maybe in their work, they seasonally release things, or maybe they seasonally take trips, or maybe they just like work in fashion and, you know, it's the spring summer season or the fall winter season or whatever. When you are designing your life as a markets person, the exchanges that you make are what's the most important thing. So who you're, you know, doing things with, trading with, your clients, your patients, your family, whatever. If it goes stale in any of your connections, you are consuming something stale. So like this really affects the love life and the sexual life. It's got to be fresh. Otherwise, these people wilt, you know? So once we're in that marketplace, we're in that field, we move into the kitchen. And kitchens people are when we're collaborating together. Oh, hey, you're my buddy. There's a community around this art or this craft or this trade. And kitchens people are very sensitive to both the art that they're making, but they're most sensitive to the community attached to that art. So if they don't have a core group supporting them, the bonds will break, the art will fall away. So it's very important for kitchens people to have a community that they can plug in and connect with. It's very important that they love their art and what they're pouring their energy into, because these are highly creative people. And it doesn't matter if you're a scientist or a photographer, highly creative people. Mountains people, after the kitchen, after we're all experimenting together, we need to like get away and have some perspective because it's a lot of drama. You know, there's fighting and bonds made and broken in the kitchen. There's alchemy, there's chaos in the kitchen. And a mountains person is somebody who's really attuned to a different level. And, you know, 5 out of 6 environments are not going to get them. So these people are usually, they could have a little radical streak. They could do something different. But as a mountains person, they're attuned to elevated environments. So that's subjective. What does that mean to you? Does that mean luxury? Does that mean height? Are some things simply beneath you and dragging you down? That's a big one for mountains people. And they're very sensitive to, like, let's say the politics in the environment. And the things we say, the dynamics, the formless things, because they're out on the mountain looking out and they see the forest for the trees. But caves, markets, and kitchens don't always see that because they're on land doing their thing. But there's something about mountains people that have perspective. And so they really do need to do things differently. Like they really do have a bougie quality to them, and they just need to surrender to that. After we're on the mountain, we move to the valley. Valleys person are all about the flow and connection of information. We're not just trading goods anymore in the marketplace. We're trading recommendations. We're giving tips. We're giving warnings. We are regularly having connections and plugging in so we can share the news. So these people are very sensitive to that. They need outlets. They need connections to have intimacy and depth. Their contacts in life and sources of energy are really, really important for them. And then after we're doing all that exchanging and sharing of everything that we've learned, we evolve into the shore and we're ready to go somewhere new. And shores people are people who are attuned to boundaries and border towns and different cultures, and they want to go somewhere new. You know, they may be very attracted to something that is not like them, or spaces that are very dynamic. But what they need to experiment with is having boundaries in life, because, you know, they're kind of fluid people. And if they don't have these boundaries, it's like they can become too heavy-footed in someone else's life. They're too caught up in someone else's kitchen. They're making a mess when they don't have to do that. As a fellow shores person, I love to go into someone else's world and learn about them, and then go back into my world and see how that has kind of changed me. So these are the 6 archetypes that are in the environment variable. You can only be attuned to one. You will resonate with one of these things, and you will also have a harmonic. You will have another one that you sort of transfer to and will almost resonate with. You will have different sort of behaviors, but you can only have one color here. And when you learn the depths, I've just given you kind of a superficial translation. When you learn the depths of that color and just how much it impacts your life, I think that's the funnest place to experiment. And that's the funnest thing for me to look at in my husband and child as caves boys and a shores person over here. And now I've got a 10-year-old who knows he's a caves kid, you know, and he knows he can go tuck in his cozy little corner when he wants to. And he knows he doesn't want to be spooked or scared. So we don't do that in our house. And it's neat to have to raise someone who just inherently knows that. You know, you don't have to like teach it like I did to my husband. So those are the 6 environments. You will only have one. There is ways that you can kind of play with it, but you first just want to build your capacity to recognize some of those things happening in your life. And if you find out you're something and you don't resonate with it, check your birth time. If your birth time ends in a 0 or a 5, we call that a rounded birth time. And there's just a chance that somebody gave you that information and didn't realize we literally do need to know if you're born at 1201 or 1202, because it could change things. So if you don't resonate with something, always listen to your body, but also always double check your birth time.
I love that. It's interesting. So my partner is caves. And 2 years
Love
ago,
caves.
2 years ago, we did an extension on the house, added a room so the kids could each have their own room. And we moved from the ground floor bedroom to the upstairs bedroom.
Mountain. Okay. How'd that go for him?
Well, I didn't notice anything at first, but recently he is not sleeping well. And I think I'm just connecting this dot as we're talking here, because 6 months ago, he found his birth mom. He's adopted. And so he's been going through a lot. And I think
wow.
that is causing him to need the cave more than not.
Well, girl, let's just talk about that first. So is this new knowledge, or was he aware his whole life that he was not with his biological mother?
He knew he was adopted his whole life, and he thought he didn't really need to know, but that all sort of changed and they've reconnected. It's going really well, but it's very intense.
Let's think about that so let's go to his origin story. I want to be delicate too, because obviously adoption is this very sacred thing. We're getting the child in a home that is safer for them, especially from a cave's perspective. And also, baby is bonded to mom. Baby grew in mom's womb. Baby knows mom's heartbeat. Baby knows mom's energy. And when baby is separated from that, safety, 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 who are you? Who are you? Who are you? That, has the possibility, not saying that this is absolute, but that has the possibility to rattle and disturb a newborn. Of course, how could it not? It's just energy at that point, and they're developing their capacity to recognize things. So even though they may have been put into a very safe home that is ultimately better, there still should just be acknowledged that in the child development, that could have just caused something, and that could have just, and you are raised, this is really your family, and also this thing happened, and it should just be acknowledged. But I didn't miss that he's also a taste color. So he's a caves person he's a taste eater. And that is just, there's now an inherent pickiness. This is a picky guy. And it is correct for him to be selective like that. And if you've moved his room upstairs, that could totally work for him. And then all of a sudden it might not. All of a sudden it might not. Or all of a sudden he does need to just move the room around. It's going to be resonant with markets. Or all of a sudden he just needs to change his sheets, or it's just not feeling, or maybe his sleep rituals, his sleep hygiene has maybe taken a hit or something. So he still will need to have a sort of freshness like you do, although it may be a different rhythm. Like you guys may not sync up. But the fact that he's kind of going through, he's going into the dregs of his experience, and that's bound to bring up issues of security and safety and being properly nourished, too. So that's kind of an intense thing that he's going through. And just so it's been said, you're sleeping beside him. And so you're feeling all that as well.
He's
happening
also,
to you too.
He's a 6'2", and he just came off the roof as well.
Oh, he's a 6'2". So there's his first line trauma. He had to go and process these things on the roof. Whether he did or not, he's going to come off the roof and be an example of something. So he sounds right on. And if he's a second line body, he's very sensitive in his body, whether he accepts it or not, but has a potential for obviously a very evolved consciousness and perspective on things. But dude is sensitive in his body.
Yeah, he's his moon is gate 19, and his external tone is feeling.
So what does gate 19 mean to you?
Or it's interesting
Like,
because
why is that important for us to know, you know?
I don't have that. So it's like the sensitive soul, let's call it. But the
Beautiful.
way it's funny to me, it sort of relates even to the saying no, like it's
I
putting
agree.
yourself first. And I think that he has people pleasing in him. And so I think it's that again, it's being sensitive to people's needs, but putting yourself ahead of theirs so you can serve the other.
Absolutely. And you know what? He's a sixth line. So he's likely had a life of like taking care of other people in some way, or, um, and there may be a sense of responsibility in that, like, especially as a parent, like, you know what I mean? Like, and as soon as you become a parent, it's like, well, these people are way more important to take care of than me, so I'll fall by the wayside. But then we're really just teaching our kids to not prioritize themselves, mistreat yourself, and take care of everybody else. It's kind of like the same thing we were talking about with food. And yeah, it's behoove of us to acknowledge like he was raised that way in a time, so he's got his own journey he's got to go on. And you've said they're stepchildren, so there was another relationship while he was on the roof that broke apart while on the roof, I'm taking it. So he's been doing the work, and he's developmentally where he is now, but he's also probably the most sensitive he's going to be now,
Mm.
right? Because you've kind of stripped things back, and you're looking at it now, you're like raw and in the world and exposed. Especially when you come off the roof, you're like reemerging to society in a way, and saying, this is how I am. But also, this is the time when he can be the most vulnerable to getting sick, and so you do want to take great care in like doing the work and taking care of yourself, even if you don't know how, even if you're just learning. It's never too late to start. And yeah, he's that's kind of inspiring.
Mm.
He's kind of on an inspiring journey. But also, you're sleeping next to him, so if he's feeling over sick of things, you're feeling that too. You're feeling that too.
Yeah. He's a reflector as well. So
What a
we're like
cool,
rare of
what
the
a
rare.
cool design.
So
What is it like loving a reflector? A gift of,
it's
of, of God here. Yeah. Let's just
it
go be around this
is,
wizard. Yeah.
but it's also it's funny because we found each other later in life, and it's interesting because I always think like what would younger version of me or even me who is like going through psoriasis, like because you get your shit mirrored back to you, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's still difficult and yet I'm further on my own journey of that. And so I'm like, oh, what would younger me have done with all of that coming at me? But it is a gift because it, he is such a
Oh
mirror.
yeah.
And
The reflector is such a beautiful creature. Honestly. Like what an incredible design. If you really just think about who they are and how they are, the way they're made, like it's pretty incredible. And the way they're sensitive, yeah, I don't have super close, bonded, intimate relationships at like a partner level with a reflector, or even in my super close kind of like inner circle. And I do get very giddy when a reflector comes up. Like to me, that's like the celebrity. It's like, oh, a reflector came in the room. What might we learn through them if we pay attention? How might we see the reflector for who they are and not just their environment that they're in?
mm,
Um, and also, they have a completely different process that I feel we all kind of also have within us. It would be great if we all just kind of took a beat sometimes and waited a lunar cycle and just kind of
mm.
gave ourselves the time to experience and understand something from all angles. So I really do think that the greatest teacher. And also, can you imagine having to make every decision that way and try and navigate reality without people interfering with you? Like the
Yeah.
way they could just be told how to make decisions that takes them away from their natural intelligence. How do you find his decision making process to be?
It's funny, I didn't, so he only recently got his birth time because we didn't know it. But
That's
I knew he
fun,
was
exciting moment.
I was like, I've been waiting 4 years for this.
Yeah,
But
I remember doing that with my husband, and we wrote into Stats Canada, and you could actually request the birth information, and they may have it or they may not because it only started being documented, I want to say, in the early '80s. And anyways, his dad was like, "Yeah, you're born like 5 a.m. or something," and I was doing the chart, and I was like, "This, you know." I'm not seeing you this way, bro. And anyways, we did request the document and we got it. He wasn't born at 5 a.m. He was born at 10:47 at night. Like, couldn't have been more different. And he's like,
Yeah.
I know what happened. My dad came the next morning tired and just clocked that that's when he saw me, because my husband was the fourth kid. He was like a New Year's baby. And his chart completely changed. It couldn't have been more wrong. So to have that 10:47 was like so like satisfying. Like, yes, now I can see you in this way that I'm very interested in. And everything did kind of click after. So I know that experience and it is hella exciting. But had I gone through that and then saw a reflector was pooped out of the process, I would have been like, you're so cool and interesting to me. Like, you're my greatest subject now. All I want to do is study you. That would have been me.
I did know because I had played around with times and I knew no matter what, he was a
Potentials.
reflector.
Cool.
So I knew that piece, but I just like watching him make decisions. And I was telling a friend, one of my best friends is also a reflector. So I feel very lucky, but
You
um,
are. Let it be known. You are. That's really cool. Wow.
but I
Cool.
was saying to her, I almost want to start documenting moon cycles for him because I feel like
Do it, girl.
I haven't done it, but I feel like I've noticed trends like
Don't do it
around
for
certain
him.
points.
Do it for you. You're interested. You love
Yeah.
him. You're watching
Yeah.
him. You're a 4/6, for goodness sakes. If you're interested in that, you do it. You don't have to put it on him, but you might be able to notice things and predict things
Yeah.
and then therefore be more supportive of him, and he might recognize that. That's
Yeah.
cool. I would absolutely be doing that. I'd be all over that. I'm like, okay, the moon is waning. Bro is pissed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just like, or, like my son is like learning a lot about like the female menstrual cycle, or like, oh, women get periods or whatever. Some of his friends are starting to get things like that. And part of the education around that is like women go through a 28-day kind of hormonal cycle that men do not experience. So like, how does that change the reflector experience? Like, men have like a 24-hour hormone and women have a much longer one. Like, how does that influence the lunar cycle decision-making process? I don't know. I haven't watched it, but it would be so interesting to track, especially like as someone with a female form. I don't have a regular cycle. So it's like, I'm still like a 17-year-old who's surprised when their cycle starts. Like, is it going to be today? You know what I mean? Non-sacral problems. But getting to know the body through the moon like that has been like fun. Makes me feel like a cool creature. So I would imagine for the reflector, like, they're just like, are they all just like, yeah, I'm a cool creature. Like, but tracking the lunar cycles for yourself and your own flow, but also for your partner, could show you just really interesting data. I think it would just be so fun to look at.
Yeah.
So where have we landed?
I mean, I could keep talking for like 6 hours.
She's like, blah. Not me. I would wilt. I'd be like,
Yeah.
I'm tired now.
My energy is gone. Yeah, I've loved this so much. So, where can people find more of you? I will include it in the show notes. I know your website. I know your Instagram.
Yeah.
And YouTube.
I'm Vaness Henry, 6'2" ego manifester, currently on the roof, practicing the shamanic arts and using human design variable integration specifically. Everything I ever do, you could really find at vanesshenry.com on my website. I have pretty strict boundaries with social media because I am very sensitive to that. So I am on Instagram, and that's actually the only place I will go and actually communicate and exchange with people. I do have a YouTube, but I do not engage there. But I do love to make art there periodically and kind of show human design in action because I think it's really fun. And those are probably the best places to find me. Or Pinterest, to be honest, because I will share a lot on Pinterest about the environments and specific ways you can set up your home depending on whether you're markets or kitchens or whatever environment you have, because I think that's a very great place to start experimenting. Get in touch with your home, set it up so it really holds you, and watch how your life changes and unfolds. Sometimes we need larger shifts, like we need to move to a new home or city, and that can be a very scary thing, but you can do that. We can do hard things. So if you're curious and anything about this area, my website is probably the best place to go. And I can offer trainings on how to read color and tone in the human design depths, but specifically how to look at it from the perspective of shamanic healing to recognize your body's signs and symptoms. You can't find that anywhere else. That is unique to me and something that I'm doing on the roof. So if that interests you, check out my Art of Healing training. Or if you're interested in working with me a little bit more directly and experimenting at home and having kind of seasonal meetups, joining my wellness club would be the space for you.
Love it. Can I meant to ask you something because I see a lot of people talking about how Ra intended the variables to come later in our
Mm-hmm.
understanding of our charts. And I specifically with your work, because it is so impactful and changing on healing, especially when people are in illness or disease. Like, what is your thought on that?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
yeah.
have been wondering lately if the colors and tones could be extracted in a way like gene keys, kind of an offshoot. But how would you do that in the most respectful way? And that's not super clear to me. But like I had said before, when we get to the place where we're no longer focused on deconditioning the adult, I don't think that variable will be the last thing that we learn. Because if you're a parent, what do you really want to know about raising your kid? How do I feed this kid? Like, what do they need for nourishment? And what are the environments they're going to thrive so they can develop properly? That's what we're looking at. And that's where we would find that. So I suspect that it will become way more important.
Mm,
However, I do want to say, I'm somebody who is self-taught using the Jovian archive. I did not classically learn through the International Human Design School because it's not really my learning environment to take things in that way. I needed to kind of choose my own adventure through the Jovian archive content, which I love and I highly recommend. But I learned the system backwards. I learned base up, base, tone, color. I didn't go top down. And I didn't know I learned it wrong. I only discovered that there was an Instagram community attached to it, let's say in like 2017, and it wasn't really big then. Um, and so as I kind of started to discover the community, I realized I learned it wrong. And then I was like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Learned it wrong. Um, so I learned it wrong. I learned from the place we're supposed to learn last. And I understand the system. So I wonder if there is one right or wrong way to learn it. I think at the time when Ra was translating the information, he's absolutely correct in that it's imperative that we know what our design type is, right? Because that's just such a basic mechanic that most of us don't know. But what happens when we get to the place and time where we do all know that? When I know
mm,
you're a this and you know I'm a that, or we can just sense it off each other. That's not probably where we're starting anymore. I think we will get to the place where we'll all invert. And I do wonder, if there's a person who is sick and I'm, let's say, going into the space and working with them, they don't need to know anything about being a generator or sacral authority. How can I talk to them archetypally about you're a caves person, you feed
mm,
through light in this way, you also happen to be feeling cognition. Let's understand what that means. I don't think we need to know all that other stuff, especially when it's at end of life care, which I have been in. A very challenging role in end of life care with human beings, especially when it's cancer involved. It's an emotional space for me to be in. It's immediately clear to me it's not necessary. We need motivation people also too. So we're motivated by what's necessary, what's missing. It's not necessary to go teach that whole system at that time.
mhm.
So I don't really have an answer here on when someone should learn this. But what I do know is when I learned it, and for me, it was very important. And it came online really loudly for me when I became a parent. And it is the primary area I focused on when I was raising my son, because I knew I had a feeling cognition son. He was going to be highly sensitive. What do I need to know about that to best support him? So I don't think there is a right or wrong way, only your way. And when this material comes to you, you will take it in when you're ready to. But I wonder if one day it will flip and we will start somewhere
Mm,
else.
yeah, I love that.
Time will tell. I might not be here, but time will tell.
This video will be out in the ethers, and someone will say, Vanessa predicted
She
it.
said, yeah. Oh God, so egotistical. Hey, I knew it. Anyway, this was absolutely delight talking to you. Thank you for letting me look at you in this way and asking these types of questions. I'm very passionate about the area, but I'm very kind of transparently on the roof and experimenting with it and simply sharing the curious patterns that I'm seeing. And it's very encouraging to me when I hear people who say, I see that pattern too, or yes, that's happening in me. It kind of like gasses me up to keep going. So yeah,
Mm,
thank you for your interest in it and even asking me to be here.
thank you so much for your time. And for everyone else, we'll see you in the next episode.